The snow came down in blinding sheets that December afternoon in 1881, and Zelda Nash knew with cold certainty that she was going to die out here on this desolate stretch of New Mexico territory between Santa Fe and Pinon, with nothing but her stolen horse and the clothes on her back to show for 22 years of breathing. She had been riding for 3 days since fleeing her stepfather's ranch outside Santa Fe, where he had made it clear that her choices were simple. Marry his business partner, a man of 53 with hands like raw meat and breath that reeked of whiskey, or find herself without a home. Her mother had been dead 2 years, buried beneath the cottonwoods on the property that should have been Zelda's inheritance, and her stepfather had wasted no time in spending through her mother's money and making plans to sell Zelda like livestock. So she had taken the mare from the stable in the dead of night and ridden north, thinking perhaps she could reach Colorado territory, find work in one of the mining towns where they needed cooks or laundresses, or anyone willing to work hard for honest pay. But the blizzard had other plans. It swept down from the mountains with a fury that seemed personal, turning the world into a whiteout where she could barely see the horse's ears in front of her. The mare stumbled, exhausted, and Zelda knew they could not go on much longer. Her fingers had gone numb inside her thin gloves hours ago. Her face felt like someone had been slapping it with frozen slabs of meat. The wool coat she wore had been her mother's, but it was threadbare and offered little protection against the wind that cut through the fabric like knives. When the mare finally stopped walking altogether, legs trembling, Zelda dismounted on shaking legs and tried to lead the animal forward. But forward to where? She could see nothing but white in every direction. The world had become a void. She thought of her mother, wondered if this was how it felt when the fever took her, this gradual coldness spreading through the body, making everything hurt less and less until there was nothing at all. The horse collapsed first, going down on its front knees and then rolling onto its side. Zelda fell beside the animal, pressing against its barrel for warmth, but she could feel the heat leaving both their bodies. Her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might shatter. She pulled her knees to her chest and tried to make herself small, tried to preserve whatever warmth remained, but it was like trying to hold water in a sieve. She must have lost consciousness because the next thing she knew, someone was shaking her shoulder and a voice was cutting through the howl of the wind. "Madam, can you hear me? Madam, you have got to wake up now." Zelda opened her eyes with tremendous effort. Snow had crusted on her eyelashes, and she had to blink several times before she could see the face hovering above her. It was a man, young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark eyes and a frost-covered beard. He wore a heavy coat and a hat tied down with a scarf wrapped around his head and lower face. Behind him loomed the shape of a horse, a big roan gelding that looked like it could pull a plow through bedrock. "Come on now," the man said, his voice urgent but gentle. "I need you to help me get you on this horse. Can you stand?" Zelda tried to respond, but her jaw would not work properly. She managed a small nod. The man slipped his arms under hers and hauled her to her feet with surprising strength. The world tilted and swayed, and she would have fallen if he had not been holding her. "Your horse is gone," he said, his mouth close to her ear so she could hear him over the storm. "I am sorry, but we need to move now or we will both be joining her. My ranch is about a mile from here." "Can you ride?" Zelda nodded again, though she was not sure it was true. The man lifted her onto his horse with practiced ease, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her as he gathered the reins, and she felt the solid warmth of his chest against her back. It was the first warmth she had felt in what seemed like years. "Hold on," he said, and the horse began to move. The ride was a nightmare of cold and disorientation. Zelda drifted in and out of awareness. sometimes thinking she was back at her mother's bedside during those last terrible weeks, sometimes believing she was a child again, playing in the snow on a Christmas morning that seemed pulled from someone else's life. The man behind her kept talking, his voice a steady thread pulling her back each time she started to slip away. "Stay with me now," he said. "We are almost there. Just a little farther, you are going to be fine. This winter you will never be alone again, I promise you that. Just hold on." When they finally stopped, Zelda had no strength left even to lift her head. The man dismounted and pulled her down into his arms, carrying her like she weighed nothing at all. She had a confused impression of a wooden structure, a door opening, blessed relief from the wind. Then warmth, incredible warmth, and the orange glow of firelight. "Easy now," the man said, setting her down in a chair near the fire. "Let me get these wet things off you before you catch pneumonia." His hands worked quickly, untying her boots, peeling off her soaked gloves, unwinding the scarf from around her neck. When he tried to remove her coat, Zelda found her voice at last. "I can do it," she said, though her words were slurred with cold. "All right," he said, stepping back. "But you need to get those wet clothes off and wrap up in something dry. I will turn around, and there are blankets on the bed in the corner there. Can you manage that?" Zelda looked where he was pointing and saw a simple rope bed with quilts piled on it. She nodded, not trusting her voice again. True to his word, the man turned his back and busied himself at the stove, adding wood to a fire that was already crackling cheerfully. With fingers that barely functioned, Zelda stripped off her wet dress and undergarments, leaving them in a soaked heap on the floor, and wrapped herself in one of the quilts. It smelled like wood smoke and sage, clean and masculine. "All right," she said softly. The man turned back around, and for the first time, Zelda got a proper look at her rescuer. He had removed his outdoor gear, revealing a tall, lean frame dressed in worn denim and a dark blue flannel shirt. His hair was brown with sun-lightened streaks, wavy and a little too long, curling at his collar. His face was weathered from sun and wind but handsome in a rough-hewn way, with a straight nose and a strong jaw. His eyes were what held her, though, dark brown and surprisingly kind, with smile lines at the corners that suggested he laughed often despite the hard life that ranching demanded. "I am Lucas Irving," he said, pulling a chair closer to the fire and gesturing for her to sit again. "This is my ranch about 2 miles north of Pinyon. I was out checking on my cattle when I saw you." "Zelda Nash," she managed, sinking gratefully into the chair. "Thank you. You saved my life." "Could not very well leave you out there," Lucas said, turning to the stove. He ladled something from a pot into a tin cup and brought it to her. "Drink this. It is just broth, but it will help warm you from the inside." Zelda took the cup in both hands, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. She sipped carefully, and the hot liquid spread through her chest like liquid sunshine. It was simple beef broth, probably made from scraps and bones, but it tasted like the finest thing she had ever consumed. Lucas watched her drink, arms crossed over his chest, a small frown line between his eyebrows. "What were you doing out in that storm? You are lucky I found you when I did. Another hour and it would have been too late." "I was trying to get north," Zelda said, wrapping her hands tighter around the cup. "To Colorado territory. I did not know the storm was coming. Running from something or toward something?" Lucas asked, his tone careful, non-judgmental. Zelda met his eyes. There was no point in lying, and besides, something in his steady gaze made her want to tell the truth. "Running from. My stepfather wanted me to marry a man I could not stomach. I took a horse and left." Lucas nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to him. "That horse was your mare out there." "The bay?" "Yes," Zelda said, grief tightening her throat. She was a good horse. I stole her from my stepfather's stable. She tried her best, Lucas said gently. The storm came up fast and mean. Even my best horses would have struggled in that. You did what you had to do, and I will not judge you for it. Do you live here alone? Zelda asked, looking around the cabin. It was a single large room with a kitchen area on one end, the fireplace in the middle, and a sleeping area at the far end. The furnishings were sparse but well made. A sturdy table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies and a few books, pegs on the wall for coats and gear. Everything was neat and organized, the space of a man who lived alone and took care of his things. I do now, Lucas said. My father died 2 years back. He built this place, ran cattle here for 20 years before his heart gave out. I have been managing it on my own since then. It is not much, but it is mine and it is home. It is warm, Zelda said. Right now that makes it a palace. Lucas smiled at that, and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree. Drink up and then you should rest. That bed is mine, but you can have it tonight. I will sleep out here by the fire. I cannot take your bed, Zelda protested. You can and you will, Lucas said firmly. You nearly froze to death. You need proper rest, and that means a real bed with warm blankets. I have slept by this fire many a night when I was tending sick calves or foals. It is no hardship. Zelda wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was pulling at her with leaden hands. She finished the broth and allowed Lucas to guide her to the bed, where she sank into the mattress, still wrapped in the quilt. He piled 2 more blankets on top of her, tucking them around her shoulders with a gentleness that made her throat ache. Sleep, he said. Everything else can wait until morning. Zelda closed her eyes and was asleep before she heard him walk away. When she woke, pale sunlight was streaming through the cabin windows and the storm had passed. Zelda sat up slowly, her body aching in a dozen places, and looked around. Lucas was at the stove, cooking something that smelled like bacon and coffee. Her dress and undergarments were draped over a chair near the fire, dry now. Good morning, Lucas said, glancing over his shoulder. How are you feeling? Sore, Zelda admitted. But alive. How long did I sleep? About 14 hours, Lucas said. It is mid-morning now. I hope you are hungry. I have bacon, eggs, and biscuits. Nothing fancy, but it is hot and filling. Zelda's stomach growled in response, and Lucas laughed. I will take that as a yes. Your clothes are dry, so you can get dressed while I finish up here. He turned his back again, that same easy courtesy, and Zelda climbed out of bed with the quilt still wrapped around her. She dressed quickly, grateful to be back in her own clothes even if they were wrinkled and salt-stained from her sweat and the snow. When she was decent, she joined Lucas at the table where he had set out 2 plates piled with food. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. The food was simple but well prepared, and Zelda ate with the appetite of someone who had not had a proper meal in days. When she finally slowed down, she found Lucas watching her with an expression she could not quite read. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Just glad to see you have your strength back, he said. You had me worried last night. Your lips were blue when I found you. I thought I was going to die, Zelda said quietly. I really did. I could not feel anything anymore, and it seemed easier just to go to sleep. But you did not, Lucas said. You fought and you are here now. That counts for something. What happens now? Zelda asked, setting down her fork. I have no money, no horse, nowhere to go. I cannot impose on your hospitality forever. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The way I see it, you have a few options. You could try to make it to Pinyon when the road's clear. It is a small town, but there might be work there, maybe at the hotel or the general store. Or you could write to someone, see if you have family who could help. Or... He paused and Zelda leaned forward. Or what? Or you could stay here for a while, Lucas said, his tone careful. I could use help around the ranch. Winter is hard out here on your own, especially when the weather turns mean like it did yesterday. I have cattle to tend, repairs to make, and more work than one person can easily handle. I could pay you in room and board, and when spring comes, if you still want to move on, I will stake you enough money for a stage ticket to wherever you want to go. Zelda stared at him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motive, but she saw only sincerity. Why would you do that? You do not know me. I know you were brave enough to run from a bad situation, even though it nearly killed you, Lucas said. I know you are honest enough to admit you stole that horse, and I know that everyone deserves a chance to start over. Besides, I meant what I said out there in the storm. This winter, you will never be alone again. I do not break my promises. Something in Zelda's chest loosened, a knot of fear and tension that had been there since her mother died. All right, she said. I will stay, but only if you let me earn my keep properly. I can cook, clean, mend, and I am stronger than I look. I grew up on a ranch before my mother remarried. I know my way around animals. Deal, Lucas said, extending his hand across the table. Zelda shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the firm strength of his grip. When their hands touched, something sparked between them, a current of recognition that made them both pause. Lucas cleared his throat and released her hand, and Zelda busied herself with gathering the plates, but she could feel her heart beating faster in her chest. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Zelda proved herself handy around the ranch, taking over the cooking and cleaning while Lucas tended the cattle and horses. She mended his clothes, organized his supplies, and made the cabin feel more like a home than it had in years. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Lucas reading from one of his small collection of books while Zelda worked on sewing or just stared into the flames, letting the warmth sink into her bones. They talked, long conversations that ranged from childhoods to dreams to the 100 small observations that make up a life. Zelda learned that Lucas had wanted to be a school teacher when he was young, that he loved books and learning but had given up those dreams when his father needed help on the ranch. He learned that Zelda had been raised by a mother who taught her to read and write and think for herself, uncommon gifts for a woman in the territory, and that she had spent 2 years watching her mother slowly waste away while her stepfather drank and gambled away their future. "Do you ever regret it?" Zelda asked one night about 3 weeks after her arrival. Giving up teaching to stay here, Lucas was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look around at what my father built, what I am building now, and it feels right. This land is hard, but it is honest. You work, and you see the results of that work. There is something satisfying in that." "I think you would have made a good teacher," Zelda said. "You have the patience for it." "Maybe in another life," Lucas said. Then he turned to look at her, his expression serious. "What about you? What did you dream about before everything went wrong?" Zelda smiled sadly. "I wanted to have a family. A real family, with a husband who loved me and children to raise and a home that felt safe. I know that sounds simple, maybe even foolish, but it is what I wanted. What I still want, I suppose." "That does not sound foolish at all," Lucas said quietly. "That sounds like the most important thing in the world." Their eyes met across the firelight, and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. Zelda felt her breath catch in her throat. In the weeks she had been living in this cabin, she had come to know Lucas Irving as a man of integrity and kindness, someone who worked hard and kept his word, and treated her with respect, even though she had arrived in his life as a half-frozen stranger with nothing to offer. But more than that, she had come to care for him, to look forward to his presence, to feel her heart lift when he walked through the door at the end of a long day tending the stock. She thought he might feel the same way, had caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her skin feel warm, but neither of them had spoken of it. Perhaps they were both afraid of breaking the fragile balance they had established, this partnership that felt like friendship but had the potential to become something more. The moment stretched, delicate as spun glass, and then Lucas cleared his throat and looked away. "It is getting late. We should turn in. I want to check the north pasture tomorrow, make sure the cattle there are finding enough forage under the snow." "All right," Zelda said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Zelda." The next day, Zelda decided to ride out with Lucas to check the north pasture. She had borrowed some of his old clothes, denim pants and a thick wool shirt that were too big on her but warm and practical. He had lent her a coat that had belonged to his father, and she had fashioned a scarf to protect her face from the cold. When she stepped outside dressed for the work, Lucas did a double take. "Well," he said, a grin spreading across his face, "you look like a proper ranch hand now." "If we are partners in this enterprise, I should pull my weight outside as well as in," Zelda said. "Besides, I am going stir-crazy in that cabin. I need to see more than four walls." Lucas saddled two horses, his big roan and a smaller paint mare that he said was gentle enough for anyone to ride. As they rode out across the snow-covered rangeland, Zelda felt a sense of freedom she had not experienced in years. The sky was brilliant blue, the air so cold it stung her lungs, and the landscape stretched out endlessly in all directions, white and pristine and beautiful. They found the cattle clustered in a sheltered canyon, pawing through the snow to reach the dried grass beneath. Lucas counted heads, checked for any animals that looked injured or sick, and seemed satisfied with what he saw. "They are doing well," he said. "Better than I expected after that blizzard. We should be able to keep them through the winter without losing too many." "How many head do you run?" Zelda asked. "About 200 right now," Lucas said. "It is not a big operation, but it is manageable for one person or two as the case may be." They were riding back toward the ranch when Zelda saw the riders approaching, 3 men on horseback, moving fast across the snow. Lucas saw them at the same moment and tensed. "Get behind me," he said quietly. "What is it?" Zelda asked, but she followed his instruction, maneuvering her horse so Lucas was between her and the approaching riders. "I do not know yet," Lucas said, "but it is always better to be cautious." The riders pulled up about 20 feet away. They were rough-looking men, bundled in heavy coats and scarves, with guns visible on their hips. The one in the center, a broad-shouldered man with a thick black beard, walked his horse forward a few paces. "Afternoon," he called. "Cold day for riding." "That it is," Lucas replied, his tone neutral. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" "Maybe," the bearded man said. "We are looking for a woman. Young, dark hair, about 20 years old. She stole a valuable horse from a ranch outside Santa Fe about a month back. Her stepfather is offering a reward for information leading to her return. You would not have seen anyone like that around here, would you?" Zelda's blood turned to ice. She kept her face as still as possible, hoping the scarf covering most of her features and the bulky clothes would hide her identity. Lucas did not hesitate. "I have not seen anyone matching that description," he said calmly. "It is just me on my ranch, and I have not been to town since before Christmas. Weather has been too rough for socializing." The bearded man's eyes slid to Zelda. "Who is that behind you?" "That is my brother," Lucas said smoothly. "He came out from Texas to help with the winter work." "Zachariah, say hello to these gentlemen." Zelda lowered her voice to a mumble and raised a hand in greeting, keeping her head down. The bearded man studied her for a long moment, and she could feel her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. Finally, he nodded. "Fair enough," he said. "If you do see this woman, there is a $50 reward. Name is Clayton Nash, runs a big spread outside Santa Fe. Send word to him if you hear anything." "Will do," Lucas said. "Safe travels, gentlemen." The riders turned and headed south, back toward Pinyon. Lucas and Zelda waited until they were out of sight before moving. When they finally started back toward the ranch, Zelda was shaking. "That was my stepfather's men," she said. "He is looking for me. Lucas, I am so sorry. I should have told you he might come looking. I just thought he would give up, that I was not worth the effort." "That horse must have been more valuable than you thought," Lucas said, "or he has another reason for wanting you back." "The horse was worth maybe $80, Zelda said. "The reward he is offering is less than that." "So yes, he has another reason. He probably still wants me to marry that business partner. The marriage would seal some kind of deal between them, I think. My stepfather always cared more about his business interests than anything else." They rode in silence for a few minutes, and then Lucas said, "You are safe here. I will not let anyone take you back to a situation you do not want to be in." "But you lied to those men," Zelda said. "If they find out, you could be in trouble. You could be accused of harboring a thief." "Then we will make sure they do not find out," Lucas said firmly. "Zelda, look at me." She turned in her saddle to meet his eyes. His expression was intense, protective, and something else she did not dare name. "I meant what I said that first night," he continued. "This winter, you will never be alone again. That means I am with you no matter what comes. Do you understand?" Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, the first she had allowed herself to cry since her mother's death. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." "Maybe I want to know you better," Lucas said softly. "Maybe I have been alone out here long enough that I recognize something worth holding on to when it literally falls into my lap out of a snowstorm. Maybe I am tired of living half a life, going through the motions, and you have reminded me what it feels like to care about something more than just surviving." "Lucas," Zelda whispered, her voice breaking. "We do not have to figure everything out right now," he said. "But I need you to know that you are not a burden to me. You are not an obligation. You are a gift I did not know I was hoping for, and I will protect you from anyone who tries to take you away." They rode the rest of the way back in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, charged with possibility and promise. When they reached the barn and dismounted, Lucas helped her down from the horse even though she did not need the assistance. His hands lingered on her waist, and she placed her palms on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart through the fabric of his coat. "Thank you," she said, looking up into his face, "for everything." "You do not have to thank me," Lucas said, but he was smiling. Then, with a gentleness that stole her breath, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek. "Come on. Let us get these horses settled and go get warm." That night, as they sat by the fire after supper, the atmosphere between them had shifted. They were both aware of it, this new current running beneath their conversations, making every glance significant, every accidental touch electric. Zelda was mending one of Lucas's shirts, and he was supposedly reading, but she caught him watching her over the top of his book more than once. "Read to me," she said suddenly. "I would like to hear what you are reading." Lucas looked surprised, then pleased. "It is just Shakespeare, The Tempest. My mother loved this play. She read it to me when I was a boy." "Your mother could read," Zelda said. "That was not common for women then." "My mother was an educated woman from Boston," Lucas said. "She came west with my father when they were newly married, and I think she regretted it sometimes. She loved him, but she missed the culture, the books, the conversation. She taught me to read from her own collection, made me promise I would never stop learning even if I could not go to school. She sounds wonderful, Zelda said softly. She was, Lucas agreed. She died when I was 15. Fever took her one summer. My father was never quite the same after that. It is like part of him died with her. That is how it should be, though, Zelda said. When you love someone that deeply, they become part of you. Losing them is like losing a piece of yourself. Is that what you want? Lucas asked, setting his book aside. To love someone that deeply. I think everyone wants that, Zelda said. But not everyone is brave enough to reach for it. Are you brave enough? Lucas asked, his voice low. Zelda set down her sewing and met his eyes across the space between them. I stole a horse and rode into a blizzard to escape a life I did not want. I think that proves I am brave enough for just about anything. Lucas stood and crossed to where she sat. He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Zelda took it. He pulled her to her feet, and suddenly they were standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I have been wanting to do this since you first smiled at me over breakfast, Lucas said, and then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Zelda responded, rising on her toes and wrapping her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more urgent, more real. Lucas pulled her closer, one hand sliding into her hair while the other pressed against the small of her back, and Zelda felt like she was melting into him, like they were two pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I am falling in love with you, he said. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a month, but I cannot help it. You have turned this house into a home, and you have turned my life into something worth living instead of just enduring. I am falling in love with you too, Zelda whispered. I think I started falling the moment you wrapped your arms around me in that storm and promised I would never be alone again. I have never felt as safe with anyone as I do with you. They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally separated, Lucas took her hand and led her to sit on the edge of his bed. They sat there together, fingers intertwined, shoulders touching, and talked late into the night about everything and nothing, making plans and sharing dreams, building a future out of words and hope. When spring comes, we should get married properly, Lucas said. I want you to be my wife in every way, not just in my heart, but I do not want you to feel trapped like I am taking advantage of your situation. You are not taking advantage, Zelda assured him. You are offering me everything I have ever wanted. A home, a partnership, a chance to build something real with someone I love. How could I feel trapped by that? Then you will marry me, Lucas asked, turning to face her fully. Yes, Zelda said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Irving. He kissed her again, and they held each other for a long time, listening to the wind outside and the crackle of the fire, safe in their warm haven against the cold world beyond the walls. The winter deepened, and with it, the connection between Zelda and Lucas grew stronger. They still slept separately, Lucas insisting on maintaining propriety until they could be married, but in every other way they were already a couple, a unit, partners in the truest sense. They worked together during the day, tending the animals and maintaining the ranch, and in the evenings, they would sit close by the fire, stealing kisses and making plans for the future. I want to expand the herd, Lucas said one night. Not right away, but in a few years. If we can get up to 300 or 400 head, we could hire a hand or two to help with the work, maybe build a bigger house. I want a garden, Zelda said. A big one with vegetables and flowers, and maybe chickens. I know it is not glamorous, but there is something satisfying about collecting fresh eggs every morning. We can have all of that, Lucas promised. "We can have whatever we want to build together." But their peaceful winter was not destined to remain undisturbed. In early February, on a clear cold day when Zelda had ridden into Pinyon with Lucas to buy supplies, they encountered Clayton Nash and two of his men on the main street. Zelda saw him first and froze. Her stepfather was a tall, angular man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. He was standing outside the general store, talking to the local sheriff, but when he looked up and saw Zelda, his expression hardened with recognition. "There she is," Clayton said, pointing directly at her. "That is my stepdaughter, the thief I have been searching for." Lucas moved to stand between Zelda and Clayton, his posture protective. "I think you are mistaken, friend. This is my fiancée." "Fiancée?" Clayton laughed harshly. "Sheriff, this woman stole one of my best horses and ran away in the middle of the night. I have been searching for her for 2 months. I want her arrested and returned to my custody." The sheriff, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, looked between them uncomfortably. "Miss, is what this man says true? Did you take his horse?" Zelda stepped forward, raising her chin. "I took a horse, yes, but it was not theft. That horse was part of my mother's estate, which should have been mine. My stepfather took everything that belonged to my mother and tried to force me into a marriage I did not want. I was fleeing an intolerable situation." "She is a liar and a thief," Clayton snapped. "Sheriff, do your job and arrest her." "Now hold on," Lucas said, his voice hard. "Zelda is an adult woman. Even if she did take that horse, she had good reason, and she is under my protection now. We are engaged to be married, and I will not allow you to take her anywhere against her will." "You have no legal right to protect her," Clayton said. "She is my stepdaughter, and until she marries, I am her legal guardian." "I am 22 years old," Zelda said. "I am not a child, and you have no claim on me. My mother is dead, and any obligation I might have had to you died with her." "Your mother left debts," Clayton said coldly. "Debts that you are responsible for as her heir. The value of that horse does not even begin to cover what you owe me." "What debts?" Zelda demanded. "My mother had money when she married you. Where did it all go?" "That is none of your concern," Clayton said. "Sheriff, are you going to do your job or not?" the sheriff sighed. "Miss Nash, did you or did you not take a horse from this man's property without permission?" "I did," Zelda said steadily, "but it was not theft. It was reclaiming what should have been mine." "The law does not see it that way," the sheriff said. "I am afraid I am going to have to take you into custody until this can be sorted out. Mr. Nash, you will need to file formal charges, and Miss Nash, you will need to answer to them." "No," Lucas said flatly. "That is not happening." "Son, do not make this harder than it has to be," the sheriff said. "I do not want to arrest you too." Lucas looked at Zelda, and she could see the calculation in his eyes. If he fought this, he would end up in jail, and she would be taken anyway. If he let her go, at least he would be free to help her. She gave him a tiny nod, trying to convey that she understood, that she trusted him to find a way to fix this. "All right," Lucas said reluctantly. "But I am getting her a lawyer, and I will be filing counter charges against Mr. Nash for attempting to force an adult woman into an unwanted marriage, and for misappropriating his late wife's estate." "You do that," Clayton said smugly. "In the meantime, Zelda is coming back to Santa Fe with me where she belongs." Zelda was taken to the small jailhouse in Pinyon, a 2-cell structure at the end of the main street. The sheriff was apologetic but firm, locking her in one of the cells and promising she would not have to stay long. Lucas stood outside the bars, his hands gripping the iron so tightly his knuckles were white. "I am going to fix this," he promised. "I will ride to Santa Fe myself if I have to, find the best lawyer in the territory. You are not going back to him, Zelda. I will not allow it." "Be careful," Zelda said, reaching through the bars to touch his face. "Do not do anything that will get you hurt or arrested." "I will be careful," Lucas promised. "But I will also do whatever it takes. You are mine, and I protect what is mine." He kissed her through the bars, a fierce, claiming kiss that left her breathless, and then he was gone. Zelda sat on the narrow cot in the cell and tried not to let fear overwhelm her. She had escaped once. She could do it again if she had to, but she did not want to run anymore. She wanted to stay and fight, to build the life she and Lucas had been planning. 3 days passed. Zelda remained in the cell, the sheriff bringing her meals and news when he had any. Clayton had returned to Santa Fe, apparently confident that the law would work in his favor. Lucas had not come back, but the sheriff assured her that he was working on her case, had ridden to Santa Fe to consult with a lawyer. On the 4th day, Lucas returned, and he was not alone. With him was a sharp-eyed woman in a traveling suit, and a lawyer from Santa Fe, a dignified older man with silver hair and an impressive mustache. They met with the sheriff and then came back to speak with Zelda. "Miss Nash," the lawyer said, introducing himself as Mr. Harrison. "I have been reviewing your case, and I believe we have grounds to have the charges against you dismissed. More importantly, I have been investigating your stepfather's finances, and it appears he has been less than honest about his situation." "What do you mean?" Zelda asked. "This is Miss Margaret Donovan," Lucas said, indicating the woman with him. "She is a private investigator from Santa Fe. I hired her to look into your stepfather's affairs." Miss Donovan stepped forward, her expression all business. "Mr. Clayton Nash has been running his ranch into the ground for the past 3 years. He has debts all over Santa Fe, and he was counting on your marriage to his business partner to bail him out. The partner, a Mr. George Sullivan, was going to pay off Nash's debts in exchange for marrying you and gaining a share in the ranch. When you ran, Nash lost his only bargaining chip. So the horse," Zelda said slowly, "he does not care about the horse at all." "Not even a little," Miss Donovan confirmed. "He wants you back so he can complete his deal with Sullivan. But here is the interesting part. Your mother's estate was actually quite substantial. Nash was supposed to hold it in trust for you until you married or turned 25. Instead, he spent almost all of it paying his gambling debts and poor business investments. If we take this to court, he could be charged with embezzlement and fraud." Zelda felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. "My mother's estate, how much was it, originally?" "About $8,000, Mr. Harrison said. "A significant sum. There is maybe $500 left, but Nash owes you restitution for the rest. I have already filed papers with the territorial court, and I have sent word to Mr. Nash that if he pursues charges against you, we will prosecute him for his theft of your inheritance. I suspect he will drop his complaint rather quickly." "What does this mean?" Zelda asked, looking at Lucas. "What happens now? It means you are free," Lucas said, grinning. "Nash cannot touch you. The sheriff is releasing you into my custody and we are going home. And then, if you are still willing, we are getting married as soon as we can get a minister out to the ranch." Zelda felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief and joy. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." The sheriff unlocked the cell, and Zelda walked out into Lucas's arms. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair, and she could feel him shaking with relief. "I told you I would fix it," he murmured against her ear. "I told you I would not let anyone take you away." "You did," Zelda said, pulling back to look at him. "You kept your promise." They rode back to the ranch that afternoon, and Lucas did not let go of her hand the entire way. That night, they sat by the fire and made new plans, brighter plans, plans that did not involve running or hiding but building and growing. "Miss Donovan says she can help recover at least part of your mother's estate," Lucas said. With that money, we could really expand the ranch, maybe even buy some of the land adjacent to ours. We could build the life we want, Zelda. We could have everything. We already have everything, Zelda said softly. We have each other. Everything else is just extra. Lucas pulled her close and kissed her temple. When did you get so wise? When I nearly froze to death and got rescued by a cowboy who promised me I would never be alone again, Zelda said, smiling. He taught me what really matters. 2 weeks later, on a bright morning in late February, a circuit preacher came to the ranch and married Lucas Irving and Zelda Nash in front of the fireplace that had kept them warm through the winter. Miss Donovan attended as Zelda's witness, and the sheriff came as Lucas's. It was a simple ceremony, no frills or fuss, just two people pledging their lives to each other in the home they would share. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Zelda with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best way. "Hello, Mrs. Irving," he said against her lips. "Hello, Mr. Irving," she replied, laughing. "I rather like the sound of that." They spent their wedding night in the cabin that had sheltered them through the winter, finally sharing the bed that Lucas had given up for her that first night. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the same patience and attention they had brought to learning each other's hearts. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Lucas traced patterns on Zelda's bare shoulder with his fingertips. "I keep thinking about that day I found you in the snow," he said. "What if I had not been checking the cattle right then? What if I had been on the other side of the ranch? I would have lost you before I ever knew you. But you did find me," Zelda said, turning to face him. "You found me, and you saved me, and you gave me a reason to fight for my life instead of just giving up. Everything that happened brought us to this moment, Lucas. Maybe it was always meant to be this way." "You believe in fate?" Lucas asked, smiling. "I believe in us," Zelda said. "And if fate had a hand in bringing us together, then I am grateful for it." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the fire burning low, the wind howling softly outside, but inside the cabin, all was warm and peaceful and right. Spring came to New Mexico with a rush of green, and the sound of running water as the snow melted from the higher elevations. Lucas and Zelda worked together to prepare the ranch for the new season, repairing fences, tending to calves born during the winter, planting the garden that Zelda had dreamed about. They bought chickens from a farm near Pinon, and Zelda delighted in collecting the eggs every morning, just as she had imagined, true to Miss Donovan's word. A settlement was reached regarding Zelda's mother's estate. Clayton Nash, facing prosecution for embezzlement, agreed to pay restitution of $3,000, a fraction of what he had stolen but more than enough to make a real difference to the ranch. Lucas and Zelda used the money to buy an additional 100 acres of grazing land and to build a larger barn. They also commissioned a proper house, a 2-story structure with a kitchen, a parlor, 3 bedrooms, and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. 3 bedrooms. Zelda had asked when Lucas showed her the plans. "One for us, one for guests, and one for the children we are going to have," Lucas said, pulling her close. "You did say you wanted a family, did you not?" "I did," Zelda said, her heart full. "I do." The house was finished by midsummer, and they moved in on a golden August afternoon. Zelda stood on the porch, looking out at the land that stretched in all directions, and felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. This was home. This was where she was meant to be. That fall, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening after supper, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. He stared at her for a long moment, as if he had not quite understood, and then a grin spread across his face that was brighter than the sun. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby, we are," Zelda confirmed, laughing. Sometime around next April, if my calculations are correct. Lucas let out a whoop and picked her up, spinning her around despite her protests. I am going to be a father. Zelda, we are going to be parents. Put me down before you make me dizzy, Zelda said, but she was laughing too, infected by his joy. When he set her back on her feet, he immediately dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. Hello in there, he said solemnly. This is your father. I just want you to know that you are already the most loved baby in all of New Mexico territory. Zelda ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. We are very lucky, you and I. We are, Lucas agreed, standing and pulling her into his arms. We are the luckiest people in the world. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as Zelda's belly grew, so did their excitement. They spent the winter preparing the third bedroom as a nursery, Lucas building a cradle with his own hands while Zelda sewed tiny gowns and blankets. When the first pains came on a warm April night, Lucas rode to Pinon to fetch the midwife, pushing his horse faster than was probably wise. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Lucas, pacing outside the bedroom door, thought he might lose his mind with worry. But when he finally heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn, relief flooded through him so intensely he had to sit down. The midwife opened the door, smiling. You have a son, Mr. Irving, a healthy boy with a good set of lungs, and your wife is doing fine. You can come in now. Lucas entered the room to find Zelda propped up against the pillows, exhausted and pale but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. Lucas approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby had a round red face, a tuft of dark hair, and tiny perfect fingers that were curled into fists. As Lucas watched, the baby yawned, revealing pink gums, and then settled against Zelda's chest with a soft sigh. He is beautiful, Lucas whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers reflexively closed around his, and Lucas felt something shift inside his chest, a fierce, protective love that was almost painful in its intensity. He looks like you, Zelda said softly. He has your nose and your chin. What should we name him? Lucas asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. I was thinking Thomas, Zelda said. Thomas Lucas Irving. We could call him Tommy. Tommy, Lucas repeated, trying it out. I like it. Hello, Tommy. Welcome to the world, son. They spent the next hour in a bubble of their own creation, the three of them together, a family complete. The midwife bustled about, cleaning up and giving Zelda instructions for care, but Lucas barely heard her. He was too busy marveling at the miracle in his wife's arms, this new life they had created together. As the months passed, Tommy grew from a tiny red-faced newborn into a plump, happy baby who smiled easily and rarely cried. Lucas was a devoted father, carrying Tommy around the ranch in a sling Zelda had fashioned, talking to him constantly about the cattle and the horses and the land. Zelda would watch them from the porch, her heart full, thinking about how far she had come from that frozen, desperate woman in the snow. Do you ever think about that winter? She asked Lucas one evening after they had put Tommy to bed. They were sitting on the porch in the twilight, watching the sun set over the mountains. Every day, Lucas said. I think about how close I came to not finding you, how easily I could have ridden in a different direction or stayed home that day. And then I think about how grateful I am that I did not, that somehow fate or luck or God put me in the right place at the right time to save you. You did more than save me, Zelda said, leaning her head on his shoulder. You gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and security and a future I never dreamed I could have. You kept your promise, Lucas. This winter and every winter since, I have never been alone. And you never will be, Lucas promised, kissing the top of her head. "We are in this together, Zelda, for the rest of our lives." The years unfolded like the pages of a well-loved book. The ranch prospered, growing from Lucas's modest operation into a thriving enterprise. They hired 2 hands to help with the work, young men from Pinyon who were grateful for steady employment and treated Lucas and Zelda with respect and affection. Tommy grew into a lively, curious toddler who followed his father everywhere, trying to help with the ranch work in his own clumsy way. When Tommy was 3, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter in the early autumn, a tiny girl with Zelda's dark eyes and a head full of black curls. They named her Rose, after Lucas's mother, and Tommy was enchanted with his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help take care of her. 2 years after Rose came another son, Benjamin, who was quieter than his siblings but with a thoughtful nature that reminded Zelda of Lucas. The house that had seemed so large when they first built it now rang with the sounds of children playing, arguing, laughing. It was everything Zelda had ever wanted, this noisy, chaotic, beautiful life. On Tommy's 6th birthday, Lucas took him out to the barn and presented him with a pony of his own, a gentle bay mare that Tommy immediately named Star. Zelda watched from the porch as Lucas taught their son how to sit in the saddle, how to hold the reins, how to guide the pony around the corral. Her hand rested on her belly, where another baby was growing, due in the spring. 4 children, a ranch, a husband who loved her beyond measure. Sometimes she had to pinch herself to believe it was all real. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Lucas and Zelda sat on the porch together, as had become their habit over the years. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and grass. "Do you remember the first time we sat out here together?" Lucas asked. "You were still nervous around me, unsure if you could trust me." "I remember," Zelda said. "I kept thinking about running, about moving on to Colorado like I had originally planned. And then I would look at you and think maybe, just maybe, I had finally found a place to stop running." "I am glad you stayed," Lucas said, taking her hand. "I am glad you took a chance on me, on us." "It was the easiest decision I ever made," Zelda said. "You made it easy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the night deepen around them. Then Lucas said, "I got a letter from Miss Donovan today. She says Clayton Nash died last month, drank himself to death, apparently. His ranch was sold to pay off his debts." Zelda absorbed this news quietly. She had not thought about her stepfather in years, had put that part of her life firmly in the past. "I suppose I should feel something," she said finally. "But all I feel is relief. He cannot hurt anyone else now." "You are allowed to feel however you feel," Lucas said. "But yes, it is a relief. That chapter of your life is completely closed now. You are free of him in every possible way." "I have been free of him for years," Zelda said. "The moment I married you, I stopped being Zelda Nash and became Zelda Irving. That woman who ran away in the snow, she does not exist anymore. I am someone new now, someone better." "You were always someone worth knowing," Lucas said. "But I understand what you mean. We have both changed, grown into the people we were meant to be, and we did it together." As if to punctuate his words, Rose's voice drifted out from the house, calling for water. Zelda started to rise, but Lucas waved her back down. "I will get it. You rest. You are growing another person in there. That is hard work." He disappeared into the house, and Zelda sat alone in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night and the murmur of her husband's voice comforting their daughter. She thought about the girl she had been, frozen and desperate, who had nearly given up on life in that blizzard. She thought about the cowboy who had found her, who had wrapped his arms around her and promised she would never be alone again. and she thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, until they had created something solid and real and beautiful. The screen door opened, and Lucas emerged, settling back into his chair beside her. "She is already asleep again. I think she was not even fully awake when she called." "She has been doing that lately," Zelda said. "Half asleep requests for water or another blanket. I think she just wants reassurance that we are here." "We are always here," Lucas said firmly. "That is the promise we made when we became parents, to always be here, to always protect them, to give them the security and love we both wished for when we were young." "You are a good father," Zelda said, leaning against him. "I know I do not say it enough, but watching you with our children, seeing how patient and kind you are with them, it makes me love you even more." "You are a good mother," Lucas replied. "The best. Our children are lucky to have you." "I am lucky to have you." They kissed, a soft, comfortable kiss that spoke of years together and years yet to come. When they finally went inside and climbed into their bed, they fell asleep tangled together, just as they had on their wedding night, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it side by side. The years continued to pass. The fourth baby, another girl they named Grace, was born in the spring as expected. Tommy grew tall and serious, taking after his father in temperament and his mother in appearance. Rose was spirited and fearless, always climbing trees and getting into mischief. Benjamin was the quiet one, happiest with a book in his lap or a puzzle to solve. And Grace, the baby, was sweet-natured and affectionate, always quick with a hug or a smile. The ranch continued to prosper. Lucas and Zelda eventually expanded their herd to nearly 500 head of cattle, making them one of the more successful ranching operations in the area. They built a larger barn, added more corrals, and hired additional hands to help with the increased work. But despite their success and the demands on their time, Lucas and Zelda always made sure to prioritize their family, to spend time with their children, to maintain the connection that had sustained them through the years. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Zelda by taking her back to the spot where he had found her in the snow. It was summer now, and the landscape was transformed, covered in green grass and wildflowers instead of snow. They rode out together, just the two of them, leaving the children in the care of the ranch hands for the afternoon. "This is where I found you," Lucas said, dismounting and helping Zelda down from her horse. "Right here. Your horse was lying there, and you were curled up against her, barely conscious." Zelda looked around, trying to reconcile this peaceful summer meadow with her memory of that terrible day. "I never thought I would see this place again, never thought I would want to. But coming here with you, knowing how everything turned out, it feels different. It feels like sacred ground." "It is sacred ground," Lucas agreed. "It is where our story began, where I found the other half of my heart and did not even know it yet." "You saved my life that day," Zelda said, turning to face him. "And every day since, you have given me reasons to be grateful I survived. You have given me love, children, a home, a purpose. You have given me everything I never dared to dream of." "You saved me too," Lucas said, pulling her close. "You saved me from a half-life, from just going through the motions. You reminded me what it means to really live, to love, to build something that matters. We saved each other, Zelda. That is what makes us work." They made love there in the meadow, on a blanket Lucas had brought, surrounded by wildflowers and the vast blue sky. Afterward, they lay together, Zelda's head on Lucas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. 10 years, Zelda murmured. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "I hope we have at least 50 more, Lucas said. "I want to grow old with you, Zelda. I want to watch our children grow up and have children of their own." I want to sit on that porch when we are gray and wrinkled and tell them the story of how I found their grandmother in a snowstorm and fell in love at first sight." "You did not fall in love at first sight," Zelda laughed. "I was half frozen and delirious. I probably looked like a corpse." "You looked like someone who needed help," Lucas corrected. "And somewhere in the process of helping you, of getting to know you, I fell completely and irrevocably in love. Maybe not at first sight, but definitely at first real conversation. That morning after the storm, when you sat at my table and thanked me with such dignity despite having nothing at all, that was when I knew you were special." "I knew it too," Zelda admitted. "I knew you were different from any man I had ever met. Kind without expecting anything in return, strong without being cruel. You were everything I had been looking for without knowing I was looking." They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, arriving just in time to tuck the children into bed. Tommy, now 10 years old, was almost too big for bedtime stories, but he still listened as Lucas read to his younger siblings, and Zelda noticed him mouthing along with the familiar words. Rose, 8 years old, fell asleep mid-story, her dark curls spread across the pillow. Benjamin, 6, asked thoughtful questions about the plot, while Grace, 4, simply sucked her thumb and stared at her father with adoring eyes. After all the children were asleep, Lucas and Zelda retired to their own room. They made love again, slower this time, with the deep familiarity of long married lovers who knew every inch of each other's bodies and souls. Afterward, as they lay in the darkness, Zelda said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Lucas asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I want to write down our story," Zelda said. "Not for publication or anything like that, just for our children and their children. I want them to know how we found each other, what we overcame to be together. I want them to understand that love is worth fighting for, that sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the best destinations." "I think that is a wonderful idea," Lucas said. "Will you tell them about how you stole that horse?" "I will tell them everything," Zelda said. "The good and the bad. I will tell them about my mother, about my stepfather, about that terrible ride through the blizzard. And I will tell them about a cowboy who found me when I had given up hope, who promised me I would never be alone again, and who kept that promise every single day for the rest of our lives." "We are not done yet," Lucas said. "We have a lot of living left to do, a lot more story to tell." "Then I will keep writing," Zelda said, snuggling closer to him. "I will fill pages and pages with all the beautiful, ordinary moments that make up a life, our life." The years flowed on, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. There were hard winters and drought summers, sick cattle and broken fences, injuries and setbacks. But there were also birthdays and holidays, school performances and first loves, graduations and weddings. Tommy grew into a fine young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, eventually taking over much of the daily operations. Rose married a neighboring rancher's son and moved to a spread about 20 miles away, close enough to visit regularly. Benjamin, true to his scholarly nature, went to college in the East and became a teacher, though he returned to New Mexico every summer. Grace, the baby, stayed on the ranch, showing a talent for breeding and training horses that rivaled her father's. Lucas and Zelda grew older together, their hair graying, their faces weathering, but their love remaining as strong and vital as it had been that first winter. They still sat on the porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset. They still slept tangled together in their big bed. They still kissed each other goodbye every morning and hello every evening, a ritual that never grew old or lost its meaning. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Tommy was there with his wife and 3 children. Rose came with her husband and 4 children. Benjamin brought his wife and 2 children. Grace, still unmarried but happy, helped organize the whole event. The house rang with laughter and conversation, with the sound of children playing and adults reminiscing. After the big dinner, after the cake and presents and toasts, Lucas stood and cleared his throat. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. 40 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his age, I found a woman nearly frozen to death in a snowstorm. I brought her home, warmed her up, and told her she would never be alone again. I had no idea at the time that I was making a promise that would define the rest of my life. I had no idea that the half-frozen stranger would become my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. He turned to Zelda, who was sitting beside him, tears already streaming down her face. You have made every single day of these 40 years worth living, Zelda. You have given me a family, a home, a purpose. You have challenged me, supported me, loved me through good times and bad. You are the best decision I ever made, and I would ride through 1,000 blizzards to find you again if I had to. I love you, Zelda said, her voice thick with emotion. I love you more today than I did 40 years ago, and that is saying something because I fell pretty hard for you right from the start. The family erupted in applause and laughter. The grandchildren, who had heard the story of how Grandma and Grandpa met countless times, still seemed awed by the romance of it. Lucas pulled Zelda to her feet and kissed her, a long, sweet kiss that made some of the older grandchildren groan in mock disgust, while the younger ones giggled. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lucas and Zelda walked out to the porch one more time. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had witnessed 40 years of their marriage, and Lucas wrapped his arms around Zelda from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. Do you have any regrets? He asked quietly. Not a single one, Zelda said without hesitation. How could I? Look at what we built, Lucas. Look at this family, this ranch, this life. It is more than I ever dreamed of. You gave me everything I ever wanted, and things I did not even know I wanted until I had them. You gave me the same, Lucas said. You turned a house into a home, a man into a father, a lonely existence into a life worth celebrating. I thank God for that blizzard, as terrible as it was, because it brought you to me. They stood there for a long time, holding each other under the stars, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage of Zelda's old life. When they finally went inside to their bed, they fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done every night for 40 years, secure in their love and their life together. The years continued to pass, and eventually, age began to slow them both down. Lucas developed arthritis that made the ranch work harder, though he refused to fully retire, insisting on still checking the cattle and riding the fence lines. Zelda's eyesight weakened, but she continued to write in the journal she had started all those years ago, recording the daily miracles of their life together. Tommy and Grace ran the ranch now, with Lucas serving more as a consultant than an active participant, but he was content with that, proud of how his children had taken what he had built and made it even better. On a crisp November morning, when Zelda was 72 and Lucas was 75, they rode out together to the meadow where he had found her so many decades ago. It had become a tradition for them, this annual pilgrimage to the place where their story began. The ride took longer now, and they had to stop several times to rest, but eventually they reached the familiar spot. They dismounted carefully, Lucas helping Zelda down and then spreading out a blanket for them to sit on. The meadow was covered in frost, the grass crunching under their feet, but the sun was bright and warm despite the cold air. 51 years, Lucas said, settling onto the blanket and pulling Zelda close. 51 years since I found you here. 51 years of love and laughter and life. How did we get so lucky? I do not think it was luck, Zelda said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I think it was fate. I think we were always meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. Every choice we made, every hardship we endured, it all led us here to this moment. And I would not change a single thing. They sat in silence for a while, watching the clouds drift across the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces and the warmth of each other's presence. Lucas thought about all the years they had shared, all the moments both big and small that had woven together to create the tapestry of their marriage. He thought about the children they had raised, the grandchildren who brought them such joy, the great-grandchildren who were just starting to arrive. I kept my promise, he said finally. You have never been alone, not for a single day. And you have never been alone either, Zelda said, tilting her face up to look at him. That is what marriage is, Lucas. It is promising to walk through life together, to hold each other up when things get hard, to celebrate together when things go well. It is choosing each other, over and over again, every single day. And I have chosen you every day for 51 years, and I will keep choosing you for however many days we have left. I love you, Zelda Irving, Lucas said, kissing her forehead. I love you more than words can say, more than any story could capture. You are my heart, my home, my everything. I love you too, Lucas Irving, Zelda replied. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You were my miracle in the snow, and you have been my miracle every day since. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was beginning to set, arriving just in time for the big family dinner that had been planned. The house was full of people, multiple generations gathered around the long table that Lucas had built decades ago. There was noise and laughter, good food and good company, and at the center of it all were Lucas and Zelda, the patriarch and matriarch of this sprawling family, the foundation on which everything else had been built. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet once more, Lucas and Zelda climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving slowly, holding onto each other for support. They had made this journey up these stairs thousands of times over the years, but each time felt precious now, a gift not to be taken for granted. They prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of long habit, and when they finally slipped under the covers, they immediately moved into their customary position. Zelda curled against Lucas's side, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders, their legs tangled together. This is my favorite part of the day, Zelda murmured, already half asleep. Every single day, no matter what else has happened, this is my favorite part, just you and me together. Mine too, Lucas agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Sleep well, my love. I will be right here when you wake up. You always are, Zelda said. You always have been. They fell asleep like that, holding each other, two hearts beating in synchrony, two souls that had found their perfect match despite all odds. And as the moon rose over the ranch, casting silver light across the land they had worked and loved for so many years, the story of Lucas and Zelda Irving continued, a testament to the power of love, the strength of commitment, and the magic of finding someone who promises you will never be alone again, and then spends a lifetime keeping that promise. The years accumulated like snowfall, gentle and inevitable. Lucas and Zelda celebrated their 55th anniversary, then their 60th. They became the beloved elders of not just their family but the entire Pinyon community. Their love story a legend that was told and retold, inspiring young couples and giving hope to those who had almost given up on finding their own happiness. When Lucas was 81, his heart, which had been strong and steady for so many years, began to falter. The doctor from Pinyon said there was nothing to be done, that he had lived a long and full life, and now it was simply his time. Lucas accepted this news with the same calm grace he had brought to everything else, his only concern being for Zelda. "I am breaking my promise," he said to her one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset. His voice was weak, but his grip on her hand was still firm. "I promised you would never be alone, and now I am going to leave you." "You are not breaking anything," Zelda said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "You kept that promise for 61 years, Lucas. 61 years of never letting me feel alone, even for a moment. That is not a broken promise. That is a miracle." "I wish I could give you more time," Lucas said. "I wish I could give you forever." "You already have," Zelda said. "You gave me forever the moment you found me in that snow. Everything since then has been a gift, and I am grateful for every second of it." Lucas passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, Zelda lying beside him, holding his hand. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, family and friends and neighbors and people whose lives had been touched by Lucas Irving's kindness and integrity. Tommy spoke about his father's dedication to family and land. Rose talked about his gentle humor and patient teaching. Benjamin shared stories of his father's love of learning and books. Grace simply said that her father was the best man she had ever known, and the bar he had set was one she would spend her life trying to meet. But it was Zelda who had the final word. She stood at the gravesite, supported by her children, and spoke in a clear, strong voice that belied her 80 years. "My husband found me on the worst day of my life, when I had given up hope and was ready to die. He saved me, not just physically, but in every way a person can be saved. He gave me love, he gave me family, he gave me a reason to wake up every morning with gratitude and joy. He promised me I would never be alone, and he kept that promise every single day for more than 60 years. Now he is gone, and I am alone in a way I have not been since that winter day in 1881. But I am not truly alone, because he left me with so much. 4 children, 14 grandchildren, 23 great-grandchildren, and a lifetime of memories that will sustain me until we meet again. Lucas Irving was the love of my life, my partner, my best friend, my everything. And I was lucky enough to be loved by him. That is more than most people ever get, and I will spend whatever time I have left being grateful for it." Zelda lived for 3 more years after Lucas passed. 3 years in which she was surrounded by family, but nevertheless felt the absence of her husband like a physical ache. She continued to write in her journal, now filling the pages with memories of their life together, stories for future generations to read and understand. She spent time with her great-grandchildren, delighting in their energy and innocence, seeing traces of Lucas in some of their faces and gestures. On a cold December morning, when Zelda was 83 years old, Grace found her in her bed, looking peaceful and younger somehow, as if the years had fallen away in her sleep. Beside her, clutched in her hand, was the journal she had been keeping all these years, and on the final page she had written, "I kept writing our story for as long as I could, but now it is time to go home. Not home to the ranch, though I loved it dearly. Home to Lucas, who is waiting for me. He promised I would never be alone, and I believe with all my heart that promise extends beyond this life into the next. I am not afraid. I am ready. Tell the children that I loved them, that I was proud of them, that they were my greatest joy after their father. Tell them to find their own Lucas or their own Zelda, to hold on tight when they do, and to never let go. Love is the only thing that matters in the end. Love is what we take with us." Zelda was buried next to Lucas on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The entire family attended. along with what seemed like half of New Mexico territory. And as the sun set over the land that had witnessed their entire love story, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered on the porch of the house Lucas had built. And Tommy read aloud from Zelda's journal, sharing the story of how a cowboy found a woman in a snowstorm and promised her she would never be alone again, and how that promise became the foundation for a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, each new family adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the legacy of Lucas and Zelda. And every winter, on the anniversary of that fateful day when Lucas found Zelda in the snow, the family would gather at the ranch and ride out to the meadow where it all began, where two souls found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. They would stand in that sacred space and tell the story again, keeping it alive, remembering that sometimes the greatest loves begin in the darkest moments, that promises made from the heart have power beyond measure, and that, when you find someone who promises you will never be alone, and then spends a lifetime proving it, you have found something precious and rare and worth celebrating for generations to come.